Okay, have you ever heard of a crime so heinous that you didn't know what to think, that you weren't sure what to do, and you weren't sure how to react? Have you ever heard of a crime so heinous that it was performed by a juvenile and you just couldn't believe it? Did you maybe perhaps hear about the case out of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma? A 16-year-old juvenile and an 18-year-old created this horrible crime scene. They murdered their parents, they murdered 3 of their siblings, 1 sibling survived, and 1 sibling was left unharmed. Maybe perhaps you didn't know how detrimental this was to our society, but maybe you do, and maybe you want to change that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So juveniles commit serious crimes knowing exactly what they're doing. So why aren't we holding them as responsible as adults? Juveniles should be tried as adults in certain criminal cases. All these cases would be serious crimes and for repeated offenders. It is ethical because at this point these crimes are not impulsive and they will not stop unless they are punished. And juveniles must suffer the consequences of their actions just as adults would. So what is the process for a juvenile to achieve adult status? According to Larry Mace and Rick Ruddle, the authors of Do the Time, Do the Crime, and a book whose primary purpose was to inform the public about the transferring of juveniles to the adult criminal court, the 1959 Standard Juvenile Court Act stipulates the following preliminary steps in determining whether or not a juvenile can achieve adult status. The first step is finding the act would be a felony if committed by an adult. The second step would be a full investigation. The third step would be the right to a fair trial. And the fourth step would be that retention of jurisdiction in the juvenile court system would be contrary to the best interest of the juvenile and the public. According to the National Criminal Justice Reference Service website, a service that is sponsored by the United States government to inform our public about the criminal court system, juveniles are transferred to the criminal court when the prosecutor or intake officer files a waiver petition. And then once that petition is filed, the juvenile court judge then looks over the petition and reviews the facts of the case to see if there is probable cause to believe that the juvenile did commit the crime and if they will be put into the adult criminal system. The judge will then decide whether or not that the court jurisdiction should be waived and transferred to that adult criminal court. The decision to waive jurisdiction over the matter does not come easily to the juvenile court judge, and many aspects are taken into consideration. Many times the judge's decision comes by whether or not the juvenile is amenable to treatment in the juvenile court system. And seen in many repeat offenders, the prosecutor may argue that the juvenile has been agitated in the past and that the juvenile court system was not able to stage an intervention to keep the juvenile from committing repeated crimes. A prosecutor may also argue that the crime was so serious that the juvenile court will not be able to intervene for the time necessary to rehabilitate the youth. According to Kathleen Michon, a juris doctor who records information to make available to the public, many times a waiver is sent through the juvenile court judge to transfer the case to the adult criminal court. But while in specific cases, the prosecutor may file the juvenile directly with the adult criminal court system, and this only happens in severe cases where, in certain states where it is also legal to do so. So what are some other factors in the process of trying juveniles as adults, and how does that make our lives better once they are tried as adults? According to Justin Grogan, the president of the Tennessee School Resource Officer Association and a law enforcement officer with 18 years of experience, in most cases, how close the juvenile is to 18 is a huge factor. Other factors taken into consideration are the psychological standpoint of the child and how important that crime is. And the case must also be a felony, like I stated earlier, for the child to be tried as an adult, but just because the crime was a felony does not mean that the child will be tried as an adult. It is just a stipulation. And so why is that ethical to try juveniles as adults? Because it does create better and safer places for the rest of the world, and for the rest of the United States. By keeping these children off the streets, we would be better able to provide safer places for our future children and for us as well. And so it creates a better world for us to live in, which is very important, especially since crime rates have gone up in the past 5 years. And so according to Richard Redding, a researcher for the United States Justice Department, by enforcing these transfer laws and holding juveniles accountable for their actions, we reduce the level of violent crimes seen in juveniles. And so alternatively, juveniles are made aware of the ability for them to be transferred to the adult criminal court, and by doing so, they are less likely to commit a violent crime in the first place. So ultimately, repeated juvenile offenders are very serious, very detrimental to our public, and they provide not a safe environment for ourselves and for our future children. And so by keeping them out of the public, we will create a better place. And by doing so and having these children knowing exactly what it is that they're doing wrong and the consequences that they may suffer, we will keep juveniles from committing more serious violent crimes in the future. Thank you.